Hey, everybody, welcome to the UFFS podcast number 9 with Darren and Larry and Dean. All things UFHL on today's agenda. As I said, with special guest Dean Millard. Glad to have you, Dean. Finally.
Glad to be here. It's I've enjoyed your chats that you've had with everybody. I really love that you guys get to know the owners. So happy to be on board, especially on such a huge weekend for everybody involved in this platform.
It's been a busy week, I'll tell you that, and we are very interested to get to know the background behind what's behind Duckman's Domination. Today's agenda, we're going to get to that right away. Entry auction, we're going to talk about that. A couple of picks that Dean, you got, and maybe a couple of guys you tried to get. We'll talk about that. The scout draft, there's going to be a big reveal coming up, courtesy of Larry, and we're going to get both of your opinions and thoughts on that, and then we'll cap it off with important dates. So all that said and done, let's start this off with Duckman's Domination. Dean Millard, the legend, the myth, the cowboy hat. I've seen the podcast, and I brought mine. I was hoping he'd bring his, but I brought mine just in case. And, man, you have first of all, I got to throw kudos out. You have the ultimate draft room. I see it, man, on all the Twitter feeds, the podcasts. Like, I'm envious. I have a little corner in my basement. Was that something you just set up in one day, or was years in the making?
No, when I got married, when I met my wife, she's a big sports fan too. She lived here. She got to see the Oilers 80s dynasties. I had to watch it from afar in Manitoba. But when we got married, we had a deal, and the deal was, and it still is that I get the second bedroom, and I can do anything I want. I don't have to clean it. I can do whatever I want. And she gets the rest of the house. And I don't get a say in anything, but I can do whatever I want. So in our first place that we lived in, I created what we call the Marsh, which goes with the Duckman's theme, which you'll find out in a bit. So this is my room. And just over time, I've collected jerseys. As Trish would say, too many. But now I have them on these walls. And the amazing thing is, they are functional because I broadcast in this room, and you'll see a lot of rooms that people broadcast with. They have the foam padding. These jerseys actually act as dampers. The sound, instead of bouncing off the walls, actually bounces off the jerseys. So it actually functions with the sound. Looks pretty good. And I have a system, but it's probably boring for everybody about where everything goes. So it's just kind of a collector's thing that I've always been, and it actually is serving as a purpose of, the sound. And now that we've added video to our podcast, it aesthetically looks pretty good, I think. So we have a Wayne Gretzky life-size picture that we make everybody stand up beside when they come in studio and get a picture taken. So there's a lot of bizarre stuff in this room.
I like it. The jerseys, that's a lot more exciting, let me tell you, than that brown, boring, soundproof padding you see on a lot of recording walls. So, it works for me, buddy. I like it. So let's start. Let's go back and let's first of all talk about Dean Millard. Heavy broadcasting background, professional podcaster. Where did this all start for you? I know you have a radio background, but walk us through it as much as you want to.
Learning quite quickly that I wasn't going to be able to play in the NHL leads you to think, well, what's the next best thing? Is being able to watch the NHL and get paid for it. And I was really lucky. My older brother Darren was already well established in the broadcast world in Winnipeg at CKND, and then he ended up in Edmonton and eventually Sportsnet now with the Vegas Golden Knights. So I basically kind of had a built-in question board, soundboard to fire things off. So watching him, I thought, man, this is the easiest job ever. I'm going to go to work, watch hockey all night, and then go be funny on television. Sign me up for that. And then you realize there's a whole lot of other stuff that goes into it. But that was my introduction, was watching my brother and doing these things and thinking that's what I want to do. I'm not going to be able to make it in any professional sport. Might as well be able to cover it. So got into that, and 22 years later, I was doing a show on TSN 1260 in Edmonton. I had gone from global television and, reached my dream of covering the NHL, got to cover the 06 Stanley Cup final run with the Oilers, which was just one of the most ridiculous things, not just the games at Rexall, which were crazy, but the party on White Ave in Edmonton, the whole atmosphere. I mean, if you've never been a part of a Stanley Cup run in a Canadian city, you are missing out. And the next time it happens, get on board with that train because it's awesome. But I had a lot of really cool experiences with that job, and it unfortunately came to an end when Bell Media made their cutbacks nationwide. It's been happening for years. As I was there, we kept losing people. And, I said to my wife at one point, I said, I've been pretty lucky to get 22 years and not be on the chopping block in the media industry, which has dwindled in every facet, from print to radio to television. And then it happened one day. And I was like, okay, what do I do? I didn't want to try and have to learn something brand new. I wanted to try and continue my career and in broadcasting. And so, once I picked myself off the floor, and it did knock me down for a while, losing your job for the first time and the fear that comes with it, but decided to get into podcasting, branched into the legal cannabis world with a really good family friend. Actually, Jake Sanderson's uncle is a wonderful representative in the legal cannabis industry with Nova Cannabis. And he helped us, kind of guide us into that world, which is brand new and so interesting. And then my sports background with a couple other shows of sports and more. Fantasy Fun Time is presented by Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports, which is a really kind of a cool show that we're developing as it goes. And then Tracking the Draft with Craig Button, which is so in line with what we're doing in the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League. So that's where I started out in Brandon, Manitoba, covering my hometown Wheat Kings, which is where I grew up, which was great. And, has given me a really good lifelong connection with Kelly McCrimmon. And, when the GM of an NHL team reaches out to you after you lose your job and says, hey, you got good things ahead of you, and I know you're going to bounce back, it really does give you some confidence. And, as a lot of people did reach out to me, that was one of the things that stood out, is that, I've known Kelly for a long time growing up in Brandon. We billeted Wheat Kings, when I was a kid. So to be able to have that sort of connection continue when you're at one of your low points is really an interesting thing. So that's where I am in a long-winded story. As you'll get to know, my answers are pretty long-winded.
No, that's good. It's a fascinating story. I'm sure Larry can probably relate on a lot of levels there. I don't know all of Larry's background. We haven't even done a Get to Know Larry episode. Maybe we should do that down the road. But I don't know, Larry, any thoughts or opinions on what Dean had to say?
Yeah, my background's much the same. I lasted 16 years in media, and exact same start. I was a junior B level goaltender and knew I wasn't making the NHL. So Dean took the words out of my mouth. I basically said the exact same thing. If I can't get paid to play in the NHL, what's the next best thing? And it was get paid to watch the NHL, and that became the dream. I went the print route. Actually, I went to school for broadcasting to start, but I switched into print fairly early on and went 16 years down the print side and digital media. And that kind of led me to my current role with Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports and UFFS. So very similar backgrounds, myself and Dean. And me and Dean go back a long way too. When he was at TSN 1260, they had a show he co-hosted with Guy Flaming, the Pipeline Show, which was a great prospects show. One of the first shows that really focused on prospects in the NHL draft and especially to interview all the upcoming talent. They were the first ones to really put profiles out for all those kids. So I've known Guy Flaming. Actually, I met him. He was in Medicine Hat and in Lethbridge interviewing Joffrey Lupul and Jay Bowmeister when I was going to school in Lethbridge and the sports editor at the college paper and covering the Lethbridge Hurricanes beat in 2002 to 2004. And Guy showed up down there and needed to get an interview with Joffrey Lupul. So I hooked that up. And then, yeah, it's just interesting how that all evolved. I was there in Edmonton for the whole Stanley Cup run. I think I made it to 12 home games in 2006, some as media, some as a fan, and took part in the White Ave fun and all the rest. And so, yeah, me and Dean come from quite a similar background. Our paths have crossed in media a number of times over the last 15 years. And the one thing that jumped out right at the start, though, was the man cave or the marsh. I'm very envious of that because I'm working in a room that I can't touch any room in my house. When we bought this house, I was supposed to have a man cave in the basement, and so far it looks pretty girly down there still. There's no jerseys, no photos, nothing. So I'm definitely jealous of Dean's setup.
Maybe it's a she-shack, Larry.
Yeah, that's right. You know, just one thing really interesting is I actually applied to be a journalist at Red River College and didn't get in. And then I was like, oh, well, I guess I'll kind of go into broad, because I wanted to maybe try to do something a little bit different. But that's where I was originally wanted to do, was to be in print, and ended up, you know, as going into broadcasting as a second choice. So it's funny how the world works out. And the great thing is now we're all working together on this wonderful fantasy platform that we have here.
Well, it's awesome to have this talent, along on our UFFS platform and UFHL. That's for sure. It helps us in so many ways. But I'm going to share a couple private moments with you guys. Number one, I knew I wasn't going to make the NHL when I didn't grow past 5'6", so that was said and done. I knew that was done, and I don't want a picture beside Wayne Gretzky, so it's going to even look even worse. Even though I don't think he's a really big guy. All that aside, I'm going to share one thing. Growing up in Saskatchewan, small town Saskatchewan, no NHL teams. My parents were certainly not into hockey, probably more into baseball. Never, ever got to experience anything close to an NHL game. WHL was few and far between. My first ever NHL game, if you can believe it, I was living in Edmonton at the time, decided to get a standing room only ticket to the Flames versus the Oilers in Edmonton. And I can't remember if it was 91-92. Where I went to game number 7 and Theoren Fleury scored an overtime goal on a breakaway. And I was a Flames fan and an ultimate Theoren Fleury fan because he's not a big guy, right? And I was just outside myself, and everybody in Edmonton was so upset. And here I am cheering down the streets. I'm lucky I didn't get throttled that night, but it was an amazing experience. Can you imagine?
Good Saskatchewan boy.
It was incredible. So let's delve into the Duckman's Domination now. I always try and visualize, where do people get their names from? And I'm thinking Daffy Duck. I don't know. I love your logo, by the way, especially the stitches on the duck's face, and it looks like a hockey brute. But so where do you get what's the basis on the name?
Well, the logo, first of all, actually is so awesome, and I absolutely love it. A guy who comes in and does a segment with me on the Cannabis 101 podcast actually designed that. And we actually, we dissect strains. So we did our homework that night, and then we worked on the logo, and the creative juices were definitely flowing. So he gets all the credit. Chris Einson is his name. But when your name is Millard, it gets spelled Mallard all the time. It's actually spelled Millard. Where my dad grew up, it's pronounced Millard. Somewhere along the way, that's in Waskata, Manitoba. I should mention that, or they'll be angry, because there's a lot of fans in Waskata that watch your channel here. So they call it Millard. Then somehow along the way, it got changed to Millard once my dad moved into the city and we grew up, or whatever. So it's Millard. It always gets spelled Mallard. So we have had, my brother went through it. I went through it. My nickname, I referenced Kelly McCrimmon. I don't remember when he called me, he was like, Mallard, what's up? Like, it's Mallard, like that. That's all he references me. And there are people from Brandon that I go back, and that's all they reference is Mallard or Duck. When I was at Global Regina in my 10-month stint in Regina, loved it. But I left right as we just had finished these promos, where they brought an actual Mallard duck into the studio, had it walking around and incorporating. So my name has been Duck, nickname, some sort of duck, since not so much when I was a little kid, but as I got older and nicknames got a little bit better and stuff, that's where it was. So, and here's an interesting thing. My teams have always been called Duckman's Dynasty. That's what they always were in every fantasy. And when I joined this, there was a team already named Dynasty. So they're, hey, do you think you could change it? And I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's big. So I was thinking, Domination, because I love alliteration. Anybody in broadcasting should love alliteration. It's the best thing ever. So that's where I went. I'm like, Domination. And excuse me, the funny thing is, when I first told my artist about the design, he came back with some pretty weird stuff like ball gags things. And I'm like, yeah, not that kind of domination. We're going to like dominate on the ice and stuff like that. So, and then we threw in the blood and the scars and all that stuff just to say like, you know, if you're coming into our arena, we are going to dominate you. We're going to look like this, but you're going to look worse. So dominate and devour is what our Ducks will do. We are meat eaters. We'll eat anything in our way. So yeah, Ducks is something that's coming a long line of my family. You know, my dad has stuff. We have the amount of like decoration ducks we have in the other room in this place is probably sickening. It looks like, you know, basically one giant duck puked a whole bunch of other ones up. So it just comes with the last name, and then the domination comes from what I want to do in this league. So that's the background on that.
Man, Larry, this guy's fascinating. He's got the marsh, right? Duckman's Dominations. I got to share with you. When I was writing down notes before the podcast, and I wrote Duckman's Dom. And I looked at Dom for a minute, and I had all kinds of crazy things coming up in my mind, too. So I get where you're coming from, and where your artist and creative juices were coming from. I get it. But it's pretty cool how these names evolve. It's really interesting to understand these stories. And I love the logo. Meat eater, dominating on the ice. Tough guy. Meat eating, my favorite, my passion. I had a charcuterie during the entry auction draft, and it was full of meat and cheese until my dog took care of it.
Yeah, it's an awesome name, and I grew up in small town Saskatchewan as well. Our hometown senior hockey team is the Looseland Mallards. So, and actually the logo isn't too much different. The 80s jerseys were a circle logo with Looseland on the top and Mallards below, and Duckman's Domination logo brought back a lot of memories. And I know Kelly McCrimmon's name's come up a couple times too. And the hockey world's a really small world. I've got to know Kelly really well over the years, especially in 2015. We connected quite well when Kelowna swept Brandon in the WHL final, and got to know him quite well through there. And then just, again, the small world thing. He grew up playing against some of my family members, and he's from nearby Dodsland, Plenty, Saskatchewan. So 45 minutes from where I grew up. And we actually bought a cultivator from his parents' auction sale when they were done farming. And so I know Kelly, and I knew Brad a little bit too, but yeah, mainly Kelly through the WHL. So very small world, and cool to kind of come full circle hearing the Kelly McCrimmon stories. And he is a great guy, like Dean said. He's one of those guys that would reach out in hard times. So good to hear that happened as well. Yeah,
he's got a gruff exterior, but a really heart of gold. And kind of the marsh came off. We were just thinking like, I don't want to call it a man cave or that cave or whatever. It just wanted to be something a little bit different. And the duck theme obviously fits in with the whole domination or the whole the man cave the theme being with the marsh. So that's the name of our arena, by the way, in Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League. So not the pond or anything. We're going with the marsh. The marsh, very original. I want to know, you've been with us for a while, a number of months. I can't remember if you were an original franchise owner, but you were in there somewhere, fairly close, somewhere maybe halfway through. But what brought you to UFFS, UFHL? How did you find out about us, and what interested you? One of the founders, Andrea, reached out to me one time and said, hey, we have this new platform. Would you be interested in? And I just started, talking back and forth and learning a little bit more about it. And the different details, and I thought, wow, this plays really well into. I've loved fantasy hockey. I've played fantasy hockey. I think my first fantasy league was, it was definitely in the 90s because I remember it was we used to actually phone the other GM and negotiate on a trade because you couldn't text or there weren't websites that had all this stuff. So I remember being late for work one day because I was on the phone with a guy. With trying to make a trade back then, and it was not going well. So I loved fantasy for so long, and this one was just, the more I looked at it, the more I read about it, and the more I talked with people about it, it just had a lot of realistic stuff. And listen, I know there's no fantasy league out there that's going to be able to incorporate every single thing about the actual NHL, but this is as close as it gets. And then you start looking at the scouting program and how deep this goes, and the stakes that this is, and it's a lot bigger than just a fantasy league when I found out. So I just looked at the kind of the big picture about, where this is and where this might go as far as fantasy. I don't know nearly enough about the blockchain and things like that, but I'm excited about the changes that we have going forward. It's a little bit above my pay grade right now, but I'm working on it. But I love the concept of this. And, I love that, we had an owners meeting today, and we've had one in the past, and there's some real passionate owners with some great ideas. So I was really intrigued, and, I'm in wholeheartedly. So just the realism, I think, that just how everything is, it's as close to being an NHL GM or owning a team as I think you can get out there when it comes to fantasy.
That was the vision. How can you actually run a so-called NHL-like team without having to spend $750 million or so dollars was the idea, And if we can, big ideas, and if we can find a way to create value and increase the value of the asset for everybody was the ultimate goal. And I think so far we're achieving a pretty good thing. Glad to have you and people like you that bring everything into this too, with your associations within the scouting community, because the scouting is a big part of it. You've got your podcast, you're aligned with High Level Scouting Agency, your wife is involved, Craig Button. Tell us a little bit about that and how that sort of came about.
We've talked about good people in the sporting world before. I would put Craig Button at or on top of that list as far as good people. I had the pleasure. It's funny, Larry, you mentioned Guy Flaming in the Pipeline Show. When the lockout was on, the Oilers had the Roadrunners here, and I was doing a lot of work at Global still, so I couldn't go to a lot of games at night. But Guy went to every game, and he sat beside Craig all season. And when the first couple of games, he came back, and he's like, this guy is so nice. Like he's knowledgeable, because I'm not going to mention names, but there are a lot of people that don't want to share their knowledge or think that they're above sharing their knowledge in sports in general, but in broadcasting sort of things as well. And Craig is one of those guys that wants to always help people and pay that forward. And at first I was thinking he keeps talking about Craig Button. It's almost getting annoying how much he's commenting on how nice this guy is. And then I got to know Craig. He joined me every Tuesday on my radio show on TSN 1260 when I was doing it for years. And it was amazing. It was such a great guy to get to know. And he was so nice. And then when I lost the job, he was another guy that reached out. And he actually, this is how he said, I just want to help you. I don't care. Craig Button should be commanding a good deal of money for his time. Bob McKenzie, Pierre Maguire, these guys, maybe people don't know it, but they make a lot of money on their radio appearances. I mean, you look at some of these guys, and Darren Dreger and all these guys, they have their schedule lined up. And so Craig Button was gracious enough to help me out and get me, started with a few things. And I was like, wow, this guy is really the genuine deal. And we had batted back and forth the idea of doing a scouting show, but I was trying to build things, and it takes a little bit of time when you're starting something out on your own. And then we got around to it, and approached Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports to be a part of it. And we have the UFFS hotline there, and we did scouting tips last week and got some actually great questions from some of the owners and the scouts and stuff. So it was a no-brainer to say to Craig, hey, one time I just said, hey, do you want to be part of this scouting program? And I said, in full disclosure, I said, Craig, you can be anonymous if you want to. You could just provide some information and you'll be our secret scout. And he's like, well, why would I want to do that? I said, will it help? He said, will it help it? I said, it will help it immensely if your name. And he goes, well, let's do it. Whatever I can help. And then he's the guy who came up with the idea to do the scouting tips and story episode. He goes, why don't we do an episode where they can ask some questions about what we watch for as in a skater, different things that people. I'm like, thank you, Craig. He goes, whatever we can do to make this better. That's how nice and genuine this guy is. He just wants to make it better. And we, developed the show. And then so he came on board, and, he's been great. He actually said to me one time, because there was a bit of a misunderstanding in how he thought things were, the list that he was to be submitting. So he actually said, he goes, give Trish my number. And when I do something wrong, I want you to tell her to call me and tell me what I'm like. I said, Craig, you have so much, you have a real job that you are, doing. And, I don't know how many of us maybe Luke, this is his only job because that guy seems to be sleeping in a mattress full of money. But he's like that Scrooge McDuck, Daffy Duck guy that's swimming in pools of money. But, Craig has a real job leading up to the draft. And during, as the draft was going on, he was still, responding to texts and advice because we were getting trade offers and things. So, it's a man who, takes a lot of his stuff seriously, including, this. And, I got a chance to see the list that he submitted to Trish for the scouting. And, Larry would know better, but, I think it was a pretty deep and pretty thorough list as far as, we're not going to go crazy, but some quality players. So he was a guy that just almost volunteered to want to do this. So it's just so amazing when you can have people like that who do recognize paying it forward. Craig realizes that, this could also help him in his platform and things like that. So salt of the earth guy, Craig Button, that's for sure.
Fascinating story. Fascinating. I don't know the guy, obviously, no connection to him other than through what I hear on your podcasts and hearing this now, but that's amazing. And those people are a diamond in the rough. Reminds me a lot of our very own Larry Fisher, working his can off to make our thing and our dream a reality. And putting in many hours to make this better and tons of ideas. And those are the guys that you want, right? Those are the guys that you want to surround you, because that makes it successful. And between learning from you and Larry's picks and everything he's putting out there in my one-on-one conversations with Larry, my God, I'm learning a wealth of information from you guys.
Well, I can't imagine the amount of free time Larry doesn't get because I'm always bothering him with questions. And I feel so bad. I really don't want to interrupt. So, Larry, when you're hanging out with other people, just tell me to buzz off or you'll get back to me later because you're always answering. So Larry is, the thing that I was most impressed of is we did the redraft for the new franchises. And I wanted to throw my team back in because part of joining a league is getting to draft your own team. You knew every single player that was getting drafted. And a lot of the guys I didn't even know. So the amount of work Larry has done for this has been so amazing. And I'm really glad to have somebody familiar with, to be able to work with in this process as well.
No, thanks, guys. That's a big compliment for sure. And Darren to attach me with Craig Button is, that's somebody that I look up to as well, right? Being an aspiring scout, and I'd like to go down that road, or that's the road. When I first left media, that was my main focus, was to, maybe I could be a scout for Seattle and work my way in there, or at least do some more consulting type work, which I have done a little bit here and there with some of the NHL teams as far as just the sharing game reports and stuff that work public and now are with FC Hockey on our website. You can see all my game reports, but before you couldn't. So there was some NHL teams I would share stuff with, but certainly I've only got a chance to meet Craig Button, I think 2 or 3 times, once in a press box in Kamloops during a Kelowna Kamloops playoff game. I think I seen him at the summer showcase, World Junior Summer Showcase was in Kamloops, August long weekend a couple of years ago. And same thing, you introduce yourself and he remembers you and he goes out of his way to, make small talk with the small people like myself. So you feel good in the presence of Craig Button, and he definitely does. He's willing to talk. Like Dean said, some guys keep it pretty close to the chest. He's willing to pay it forward. So Craig Button's a good guy. And like Dean said too, just good to have everybody involved in this platform. And certainly Craig Button's name, being part of the Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports and the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League has helped push the platform forward and add some legitimacy as well, to have a former NHL general manager, Stanley Cup champion, right there scouting. And like Dean said, it's crazy to hear that in the middle of the NHL draft, he's fielding questions about the UFHL and planning his draft list for the draft that's in progress right now. It's underway. I think we're 7 rounds in, and I know high-level scouting agency, which is Trish Millard and Craig Button, they're hoping to get 35 prospects out of this draft, and they just might. So I got 28 more rounds to go at least tonight.
Can I just ask, without revealing it, what was the deepest list? Like, how long was the deepest list that you got? I'm just curious.
I think the deepest list was 142 prospects out of the 217 that were drafted. But that list actually, interestingly, probably had almost 40 or 50 that went undrafted. So that was an interesting part, is you could list, from 64 all the way to 217 would be, 150 names or whatever from the 2020 NHL draft. But a lot of lists surprisingly had undrafted prospects, and there will be a lot of undrafted prospects claimed in this draft, in the scout draft. So it's interesting that our scouts are real scouts, and they see talent that maybe they think the NHL teams missed on, and they're still going to pick those guys up here tonight. So that's it's great that we have a lot of real scouts involved, and people that have scouting history in the WHL, the NHL, even in Europe with Jeff Ray. He's over there working Switzerland, France, those regions, Germany. The regional scout for Dauber prospects. He's originally from British Columbia, but he's over there now working and scouting. And so, yeah, there's a lot of guys involved with the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League who are legit real world hockey people. And so they've come up with some really impressive lists for this scout draft. And certainly on the open market, there's been 750, 1,000 prospects listed since September 1st, and a number of them I've had to look up. So like Dean said, I knew every prospect in the redraft and at the NHL level, and probably know every player and prospect at the WHL level, but certainly there was a lot of names. I had to go to Elite Prospects and see who this kid was when the scouts were listing them on the open market, going as young as 15 years old in the 2023 NHL draft. So I'm learning as I go too, and it's been nothing but fun.
I got to tell you, Dean, Larry, when he did that, as you mentioned, he had an encyclopedic type knowledge of every player to fill in the time between the picks. I tuned in and I listened most of that night, and I didn't know Larry that well at that point, and I thought, wow, this guy's amazing. And we were throwing kudos his way after, the founders all saying, wow, great job, this and that, Larry. And he says, yeah, but he's such a perfectionist. But, I remember this one kid at pick 262. I said he played on this team at Adam, but geez, I was wrong. He actually played on this team when he was 12 or 13 years old. And I'm like, really, Larry? You're picking out those two mistakes after everything else you got right? Come on, man. He's good to have on board. Good to have you both on board. Let's talk about this entry auction. I mean, it was pretty interesting. I tuned in for the whole thing, watched how things went. You told me in a previous chat, Dean, getting ready for this podcast, that you had a strategic, your players, you had your guys lined up. And I watched, and it looked like you had a guy that you're after. I don't think you got, but you did get Conor Zari of the Calgary Flames. Was that one guy that you wanted to get, or you had a couple other guys on your radar?
Yeah, we had a list of three that we thought we could realistically get out of this draft, and it was the three guys I bid on. We thought long and hard about starting with Dawson Mercer. That was the first guy we could bid on, and I do like that player. But it's funny when we kind of had our discussions with myself and Jamie Thomas, who we really wanted. We're hoping somehow we could get a shot at Cole Perfetti or something like that. I was there if we could somehow, maneuver our way, with the obviously the Jets connection there. That's what he was hoping for. That wasn't going to happen in our we weren't going to go all out to move up in this draft. So I said, I think we should just stick right at 22 when our player comes up and then go after Hendrix Lapierre. And so I said, I'm just gonna send just a message to Craig. Actually, it was right before Craig and I were about to record, and I said, hey, this is my strategy. This is what I'm thinking. I said, I got this pick. I can go to this. I said, or there's this, I got the 22 pick with Hendrix. He's like, well, why would you do anything else? I'm like, that's what I was hoping you would say. So that's where we had targeted, and I had hoped that the scares of a lot of people, that he was going to scare a lot of people off. The thing I'm encouraged about this player is that a lot of people, it's not just concussions, that it was a bit of a neck issue. He took a hit, and several guys have come back from this sort of situation. I think it's kind of similar to what Sidney Crosby had around that Winter Classics. So I'm not scared of this guy, and I think in conversations with Craig that him and I had, Craig thought if he was healthy, he might be able to challenge for a top 8, maybe around the 5-6 spot or something like that. So that was our strategy. And then the bidding got just too high for me. And I thought, okay, next guy would be Forster, who's, been getting comparisons to Corey Perry. from Craig Button, who I really obviously trust a lot. So I thought, okay, I'll take a 50 goal scorer, and then but there was, I'm looking at the guy after him, and I'm thinking, okay, I like this player, but there are some concerns in his game that could be worrisome. I don't have a lot of those concerns with the player, so. At one point, the bidding got to a point where I wasn't comfortable, but I was comfortable paying that for Zari, who, for me is a little bit of everything in the game, and I think could be valuable. A guy could play on your first line, your second line, or something like that. So third line even. So we were pretty happy with what we ended up with. The bidding process was interesting. Trying to find different players. I remember watching Trish during the scouting and her bidding on Shane Wright. I was just so impressed. I was like, man, I've never she's so just going after it, and she's not going to be denied with this player. And then I was like, okay, I looked at the players, and I know the process that if you get to a point, then you're taking this player. I was so wanting one of these players that I just said, okay, that's it. I'm coming off the top rope in this, and I just threw down 500. I think the bidding was high threes, early fours. I'm like, all right, let's end this. The people's elbow came out, whatever. The Macho Man came flying down, $500. Then Crickets got my player. Was really happy. Actually lit up a joint and celebrated the rest of the day. So because that was the only pick I had, I didn't have another pick. So it was a really exhilarating thing, and. We're happy with the player I got. Obviously I wanted Hendricks Lapierre. This is the thing that I can say that NHL teams can't say. You would never hear an NHL team say, we actually wanted the guy that didn't slip to us, but we'll take this guy. But if I'm being honest, I'm happier with the Zari. If I could have got the other player a little bit cheaper, I would have been happy. But I love this player, Larry. You would seen him more than I would. So I like this player. And I'm excited what happened. I'm really excited about the future of this draft, which was discussed today. But I liked how this process went. It's still puzzling that some people came into the draft not knowing all the kind of the rules and things like that. It's a pretty important day, but those things will be worked out. And I thought it was fascinating. It's the first time, and I've been in auctions before, and I've obviously been in drafts. I've never been in a draft sort of combined auction. So. Fascinated by this the process, and I'm okay with how it worked out. We didn't target the 2020 draft as being something we were crazy about. We're loaded up. We have 5 first-round picks in 2021. We have 2 first-round picks in 2022. So those are the drafts that we focused on, and we've recouped a lot of assets. We've traded a lot of players, but we've built a strong foundation to build the marsh upon and to hopefully dominate. Down the road. So to be able to dip my toes into that auction process this year was interesting, knowing that next year is such a big one for us.
What do you think, Larry? Was this a domination type pick? Good deal?
Yeah, well, I definitely think that, like I said, next year is the big one. That's where Duckman's Domination are going to be a big player, almost like Red Army were this year in this year's auction. Next year, you look at the 2021 picks, and Duckman's Domination is sort of controlling the majority, or not the majority, but with 5 first-round picks, that's obviously a good haul, and you're in great shape going into next year. But you're right, Conor Zari is a guy that I followed throughout the Bantam draft into Kamloops. Kamloops Kelowna rivalry is probably, they had a line brawl, goalie fight, everything this season. It's probably the biggest rivalry going in the WHL right now, or one of them. It's really reignited in recent years. And Conor Zari, he plays with a chip on his shoulder. He's got a lot of swagger. He's just a real gamer. He's one of those kids that rise to the occasion when the game's on the line. He likes to step up. And if he does step up and make a difference, he definitely lets the other team know about it too. He's got that real swagger to his game. And I know listening to Tracking the Draft, Craig Button basically said, Conor Zari outside of the top 10, he's my guy. He's one guy that I head over heels with this year in this year's draft class. He's sort of not a man crush, but he's definitely one of the guys that Craig Button loved to see. So I know Craig would be greatly happy or supportive of that selection. And like I said, with Hendricks Lapierre, I think the concussions I thought would scare people off too. But when Luke got into the bidding with Red Army there, and it was his last pick, that was his swan song. He only had 1 pick left, and when he started going in on Hendrix Lapierre, I knew there was no stopping him, and especially the French connection. Luke's from Montreal, and Hendrix Lapierre playing there in the QFHL. I knew that was a guy he wanted too, so it was an entertaining bidding war. But I think Dean did the right thing to pull out, refocus, and really go hard at Conor Zari, and like I said, throw down the gauntlet with the big jump in the bid that scared others off. And the bidding is very interesting. How some people bid just $5 increments, and some people did try to push their weight around a little bit by upping the bids in big jumps to scare people off. So it was a successful tactic, and I think you'll be happy with the player. I know him a little bit off the ice, and definitely seen him play a ton on the ice, and he's a good kid and a real good productive, like I said, middle six center going forward in the NHL. Could become a Bo Horvat type perhaps.
It's so interesting. I remember having this discussion with you, Larry, in the beginning of the thinking about when you're, how much money do you have compared to the person you're bidding against that you don't know. And I think, and I know, talking to a whole bunch of different people that got into this, we all thought we had the most money. Right. And then, Moneybags McGee, Luke comes along and starts dropping like $1,000 bills on everything. He's making it rain. So I was so hoping Luke would have not been in that bubble. I was literally looking at this going, I'm watching the bidding, everything. I'm like, okay, he's gone if he and then he didn't. And I'm like, now I knew there was going to be a bidding war for this guy. That's what I was, and that's what made it so unique is this guy going to stay in this? And if he loses and now he's coming after this player or vice versa. But, in the beginning of this, I thought, I have so much money. I'm not going to be outbid for this or that or the other thing. Like, I'm talking the very beginning when you're looking at different things. And man, it's amazing. And it's one thing if, you're sitting there and what the guy's bank account is, but when you don't know, it's nerve wracking. And, you're thinking like, oh, I can do this or we can do that or whatever. So, Trish found out quickly in some of those prospect bids, just, how feeble our bank account actually was compared to everything else. Some of the other people anyway.
I offered Luke to be on this podcast, but he just didn't pay me enough. So he's not on here today. We're working on that. I can't wait for him to hear this, actually. Might have money come my way. You guys, I'm cognizant of the time, and as a recording here, and I know, Dean, that you have to catch that Dodgers game. Don't want to make you late. So
I just don't want to be swearing on this show if things don't go well for Dustin May. If the Dodgers win, everybody in LA is going to be wearing these big Krusty the Clown hair after Dustin May's salad that he has. So I just don't want to be swearing during the show if something goes wrong.
Yeah, we want to make sure we get you to that. So I want to move on to the scout draft because we're going to do a big reveal, and I wouldn't mind getting some banter between you and Larry on how this went and some of the players and some insights. So I don't know, Larry, if you're ready, but actually before, let's preface this a little bit. What did you think of Liz and Andrea's little witch's brew, rotten fingers, dead man's hat, and whatever they had going on? I thought that was pretty innovative. It was kind of fun, wasn't it?
Loved it. I love the that's the cool thing that this is. Another thing that adds to this, it's not just a fantasy league. There's a scouting program and there's a lot of entertainment. I mean, that Telegram chat rarely stops. You talk about guys that are in it, like, and you know what? Maybe not every owner is as active or GM, but a lot of people are. So I love that. I love the 18 different eyes of Newt, and I'm a big Halloween. You've seen my costumes. By the way, wait till you see my last two costumes on that show for this month. I love Halloween. I do 31 horror movies in 31 days every Halloween, as much as I can. So I love their production, and I just love that the people that develop this, like you guys, the founders, you care as much about developing this and making it entertaining and keeping people going and building this as we do, who have also invested in it. So great production, and I hope it continues. And I said I want to help them out with some different things that I can provide as well for some of their productions. So I think the sky's the limit with those two. And as long as we don't lose them to like Saturday Night Live or something like that, I'm okay with it.
Well, we haven't signed them to a contract. We might have to get into negotiations before they take off. Larry, are you ready for the big reveal?
Yeah, for sure. So Liz and Andrea, they did the draft lottery to determine the draft order for the open market for the scout draft for all the 2020 prospects. So the first and second rounders, as well as Donovan Sabrango, the first pick in the third round, were auctioned off to the franchises. And then the players from 64th overall to 217th overall, rounds 3 to 7, as well as any undrafted prospects, were available to the scouts. And they had to submit a list by today. And so we went through the lists and in the following the draft order, and now we have the results for the first round anyway for today's show as far as the 2020 open market draft. So we can definitely get it started with one of our newest scouts, Andy Karanduk, at first overall with his scouting agency, which will be known as Horse Lake Scouting. He was the big winner of Liz and Andrea's draft lottery, and Horse Lake Scouting selected first overall Edmonton Oilers forward prospect Carter Savoy, who comes from Dean's neck of the woods there. He's playing for the Sherwood Park Crusaders in the Alberta Junior Hockey League.
Superstar shooter, man. This is a guy who's one of the best scorers in the draft. Almost a goal per game. We did have him pretty high on our list as well, knowing that we probably weren't going to get a shot at him. And I could see why this guy going to a good school in Denver as well. I know the Winnipeg Ice, potentially could. Well, I think they have traded for his rights, so they could try to lure him the way. And he was on one of the very, very early episodes of Tracking the Draft that Craig and I did. So people can check back if they want to. But just a lightning quick release on this guy, Larry.
Yeah, if you put Carter Savoy next to Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl in the years to come, the Oilers need some scoring wingers, and I think Carter Savoy can be one of those players down the road for sure. I think maybe he fell a little bit. It's interesting. He went first overall in the scout draft, but he's a 5th round pick. Or 4th round pick. He went 100th overall in the NHL draft. So they could have picked as high as his 64th prospect. They took the 100th overall prospect first. So that shows how confident they were in Carter Savoy. And I think a lot of people thought he fell maybe because he was playing a tier 2 junior and perhaps playing down to his level of competition at times, maybe pacing himself for a big playoffs, which obviously never came to fruition because of COVID. But Carter Savoy, 1st overall. 2nd overall, Swamp Scouting, which is an affiliation of the Gators. And Swamp Scouting has selected Jeremy Poirier, defense prospect for the Calgary Flames from QMJHL St. John. And Jeremy Poirier is one of those kids who has first-round talent, no doubt about it, but some consistency and some defensive awareness stuff caused him to fall to the 3rd round. But Swamp Scouting grabs Jeremy Poirier 2nd overall.
That's the guy that we had number 1 on our list, actually, that was submitted. And It's interesting. I love hearing the different opinions because that's what scouting is, right? Like that's why sometimes you see a Thomas Hickey go 4th overall in the draft and kind of surprise the little people. Or, the one way back when was Adrian Foster, the Saskatoon Blades, taken by the New Jersey Devils. So it's great to see this. And, this is a guy that I know when I got to peek at the list that Craig sent in, he was pretty high on this guy as well. I'm a little bit surprised he didn't go in the 1st round, actually.
Yeah, or certainly not in the 2nd round. It was surprising that he fell out of the top 2 rounds, and Calgary was able to land him in the 3rd round, which Calgary's done over the years. They got Oliver Shillington as a big faller as well, similar type player, offensive-minded defenseman who have some concerns, some red flags about how well they defend. So at 3rd overall was Scott Mills, an affiliate of the Yetis. So a Yetis affiliated scout, Scott Mills, and Scott has selected Jean-Luc Foudy, forward for the Colorado Avalanche, younger brother of Liam Foudy. Obviously played in the playoffs with Columbus Blue Jackets, top prospect. That's quite the bloodlines in the Foudy family. Both parents, their dad played in the CFL, their mom was a track star, but Jean-Luc Foudy, Colorado forward prospect, goes 3rd overall to Scott Mills.
Yeah, I don't know as much about him as I do with some of the other players. I haven't been able to follow prospects as much. Unfortunately, I had to focus on the Edmonton Oilers during the decade of darkness. So I did once I got away from the pipeline show, I didn't get to follow the prospects as much, but this is a guy that I think I'm just looking at the list that Craig had submitted. I think he was in he might have been in the second wave of some of the players that they had listed. But again, different people view different players as valuable, and it all depends on how long your list is too, right? The longer your list is, then the more doubt you start creating at that top end, and maybe some guys get pushed down a little bit too.
For sure. And Foodie, his calling card is speed. He's one of the fastest skaters, arguably the fastest skater in this entire draft class. He's a burner, but he's got some hockey sense. Some people question his hockey sense as to he can go fast, but as Craig said in the most recent episode of Tracking the Draft, the scout tips, what to watch for in skating. Can they shift gears? Can they, are they agile as well as just fast? And Jean-Luc Foodie is a speed demon, but how does the rest of his game translate, and what's his offensive upside? That's sort of the question mark there, but certainly another guy that was expected to go in the first or second round for much of the draft here. Fourth overall, Dave Drinkwalter of the Ice Vikings, or the Ice Vikings affiliated scouts. They have selected at fourth overall Lucas Cormier, defense prospect for the Vegas Golden Knights, and a smaller offensive-minded defenseman. Reminds me a lot of Samuel Girard of the Colorado Avalanche. That's who I've compared Lucas Cormier to. And Lucas Cormier, in my personal rankings, was 32nd, the first pick of the second round. So to see him slide to the third round, that might be a steal for our friend Kelly McCrimmon, getting Lucas Cormier for the Vegas Golden Knights, and also Dave Drinkwalter getting him for the Ice Vikings affiliated scouts in the UFHL.
Yeah, this is a guy who I thought was not going to be available in this, that I thought maybe would have been a top two guy. But he's a guy who, I think looking at the list and talking with Craig, a potential top four, maybe like a number 4 guy that could maybe play up a little bit. I think he's compared him to Victor Mete a little bit too. So, but again, a guy that I was pleasantly surprised that we were able to actually list. That's the thing that, when you're watching that draft and you're looking at it and thinking, what player is going to fall out of the second round and be available in the open market? Because that's where, when you have, a scout that has that connections, that's where, we can all look at the top 64 list and, move the odd guy here and there. But rounds 3 to 7 and beyond is where scouts, I think, make a lot of their money in finding these guys. So for those guys to be able to slip out of that second round, it's such a bonus for the scouts in this platform to get some of these quality players.
Absolutely. And then that's, like I said, rounds 3 to 7, that's where scouts make their hay in the NHL and in our platform as well, because they're getting all these prospects at a flat rate, $20. And some of these prospects could be sold for over $100 on the flip side when the franchises want to acquire them. So the rounds 3 to 7 is where the scouts are going to make their hay in the UFHL and on the open market largely as well. At 5th overall, Pipeline Prospects, which is Arnie Entz. The Pipeline Prospects have selected Yoni Yermo, a defense prospect from the Vancouver Canucks. And Yermo was one of my boys this year. I had him ranked as a first rounder, and he slipped to the third round. So for me, that's a steal. I'm a big Yoni Yermo fan. One of the best skaters in the draft. His explosiveness reminds me a bit of Yoni Pikkinen, former Oiler, Philadelphia Flyer, Carolina Hurricane. I see a little bit of Yoni Pikkinen and Yoni Yermo, not just the first names. He's got the size, he's got the explosiveness. The question mark is what kind of offensive upside does Yermo have, and can he defend well enough? And another guy who has defending question marks, but a raw talent who's trending up for sure. So Pipeline Prospects grabs Yoni Yermo at 5th overall from the Vancouver Canucks.
This is a guy that we did an episode of Tracking the Draft this year where we brought in Jukka Nevalainen from Dauber Prospects, and this is one of the guys that we talked about. So it was interesting to see the different, I guess, opinions from two different scouts. But I think that I think that this guy, if you can you can skate, Well, then a lot of things are a lot easier after that. And once this guy gets kind of acclimated to North America, I think this could be a guy that people are going to be like, how did he slip to here? Because the skating ability, even if he doesn't produce a lot of offense, skating defenseman. I think they kind of discussed Esa Lindell a little bit about how his game transformed once he kind of got over to North America. So. I think this guy's skating, even if he doesn't produce a lot of offensively, and that's the thing, in our platform, you still need guys that are number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7 on the depth chart and things like that to fill out your roster. It's not just, starting 3 forwards and 2 defensemen and every player on every roster is an all-star. You need 4 and 5 defensemen. And, I think that's what probably he might project to be unless the offensive game really comes around. And I think he could be a pretty valuable a member of the UFHL at some point.
For sure. I see. I know me and Yoki have had a couple Twitter wars or Twitter engagements over Yoni Yermo throughout the season. I do see that higher offensive ceiling, but perhaps even more so than an Esa Lindell type guy. That's why I was so high on him. I see that raw potential, but definitely I think 6'4" and one of the best skaters in the draft. You get him in the 3rd round, and here in the scout draft, I think you got to be pretty happy with that selection. At 6th overall, Daltak Scouting Service, Gur Daltak, he has selected Nico Dawes, goaltender from the New Jersey Devils. Somebody who was highlighted on the Tracking the Draft Time Machine, compared to Marty Turco by Craig Button, which Craig knows Marty Turco well from their Dallas Stars days, so quite the compliment paid to Nico Dawes, and he goes 6th overall to Daltak Scouting Service.
That's interesting, and I think one of the things that Craig was talking about is just the demeanor and the attitude. I mean, Marty Turco was one of the most laid back guys. If you talk to different NHL players of the mindset, not being rattled, and that's what he saw a lot of in Nico Dawes. And I know the goaltending thing is interesting in the 3 to 7 draft. I mean, like a lot of people were looking at Askarov and saying, he's going to be the best guy since Carey Price. But then after that, you start looking at different goaltenders. And, I think if you look at the numbers, there's probably been a lot more goaltenders developed. Well, obviously, there's a lot more picks after the 1st round for that to be. But this is the 3rd round to the 7th round. And I would throw in the 2nd round there, too, is where a lot of really talented superstar goaltenders come from. So I know there was a lot of discussion between Craig and different people about where to slot in the goaltenders. And I think, Larry, the list that they originally sent in had a bunch of duplicates or something like that, because I don't think they were sure what to do with the goaltenders. And I'm not really sure, I think Askarov is going to be a home run, but then after that, it's a crapshoot, more so than any other thing as far as goaltenders. And one of the things we just talked about on Tracking the Draft is that drafting, a bad team that gets labeled as a bad drafting team, it's not always at the draft table, it's at the development. So, what goaltender is going to be stuck behind this guy or that guy? I didn't really, when Trish was like, where do you think the goaltender should be? I'm like, that's like throwing darts, man. I'm not really sure when it comes to rounds 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or undrafted when it comes to goaltenders. I think that was probably the hardest thing for a lot of people to factor in, is how high and what goaltender do you take? Because I think there's a few options out there.
There is. And one thing with goaltending is you usually have to wait longer for them to make an impact or to become maybe more valuable in the UFHL, or certainly to make an active roster. So goaltenders generally take longer. One nice thing about Nico Dawes is he is an overager. He's been through the draft once before. So he's one of the older goaltenders available. So he is a little bit closer. And there could be opportunity there. I know New Jersey's high on Mackenzie Blackwood, but they signed Corey Crawford, and his days are, winding down. He's going to have hopefully a couple good seasons there in New Jersey, but then by then Nico Dawes could be knocking on the door. So a solid pick for Gur Daltak and the Daltak Scouting Service. At 7th overall is Justin Anstey, the new affiliated scout for power players. Justin was formerly under the Easton Scouting Solution team. He was one of their scouts, but he's affiliated now with Power Players. And Justin has selected at 7th overall, Daniil Gushin, forward prospect for the San Jose Sharks, who's been developing in USHL Muskogee and is on his way to OHL Niagara. He almost ended up in WHL Regina for his draft year. They selected him in the import draft, but he didn't want to come to Regina, or whatever reason he didn't end up there, and stayed in Muskogee in the USHL. He was a 3rd-round pick for San Jose, and now he goes 7th overall to the Power Players as kind of a real fast, exciting forward to watch. Typical, prototypical Russian forward. Could be frustrating for coaches at times, but he's a quick player who definitely is around the puck and a real buzzsaw.
Yeah, this is a guy that I was really excited about when Craig and I talked about him on the show, and then when I saw the list that they submitted and where he was on that list, I was and that was before that the draft order had been decided, I think. So you're trying to guess, like, okay, are they going to be able to get this guy depending on their pick? I like this player. I was watching some highlights. I think he wears 71 or something, or 68 or something like that. So I think there was just some the connection between the Europeans that the Penguins had and stuff like that. Definite player in his game, but you said it exactly, Larry. Is there's great skill, but if that skill only shows up every 4 games, it doesn't do a coach a lot of good, other than probably finding another job, because he keeps throwing this guy out there. So certainly some consistency, but I like this player. I was hoping that this guy would fall into the hands of high level scouting. So definitely, I think a well spent pick, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm a Daniil Gushin fan as well. I think again, he's just got that explosiveness to him. He kind of reminds me of a Martin Hadlat type player. I think he could have that kind of upside. In another year that wasn't as deep of a draft, we could have been talking about him as a potential 1st rounder as well. And as we will be with this next pick at 8th overall, who many had as a 1st-round pick at times throughout the draft year in scouting rankings. But at 8th overall is Strong Scouting, which is affiliated with Strong Island. The scout is Matt Weber, the son of Terry Weber, who recently purchased Strong Island. But Strong Scouting has selected Zion Nighbak, forward prospect for the Carolina Hurricanes. Another undersized forward, under 5'10", set some scoring records in the Swedish Junior League during his draft year, but actually slipped down. I believe he went in the 4th or 5th round. He was one of those guys that people were wondering if everybody forgot about him and why is he still there. But Zion Nighbak from the Carolina Hurricanes goes 8th overall in the UFHL scouting draft to Strong Scouting.
Yeah, he went 115th in the NHL draft, and kind of similar to what we talked about before. I think there's some maybe some consistency or some concerns, or maybe it's the size that people are scared off of. But scoring is the name of the game. If you can work on some other parts of the game, obviously this is an NHL team, and 115th to a guy who can light it up like that. That's obviously a risk reward pick for Carolina when they're looking at the cons versus the absolutely being able to light it up. So, but still, definitely a guy who has tons of skill, and I think that's a worthy pick at this spot.
And if you're following along with our scout draft through 8 picks, and you're comparing it to the actual NHL draft results, you'll see how random this is and how much these scouts have did their homework and found prospects that they like, because these aren't prospects 64 to 72 by any means. There's been a few gone that are in the 80s or even in the hundreds. So scouts are picking the guys that they like, which is great to see, which takes us to 9th overall, and Charlotte Vogeli of the Stallions affiliated scouts. Charlotte has selected Justin Sordiff, forward for the Florida Panthers, prospect from the Vancouver Giants in the WHL. Got a little bit of Evander Kane in his game, a little bit of Brendan Gallagher, 2 former Giants forwards, but a little bit of consistency issues too. So Justin Sordiff is on his way to become a Stallions property perhaps, or perhaps they'll turn around and flip him to another franchise or auction him off to all the franchises. That's one cool thing about having affiliated scouts, is you can use them as a feeder system for your own franchise, or you can use them as a revenue generator for your franchise to have more income and more ability to make moves within the UFHL. So it's kind of having an affiliated scout works both ways, feeder system and as well a revenue generator. So Charlotte Vogely at 9th overall selects Justin Sorda for the Stallions.
Well, and that's the reason that Trish, when we were talking about this and the scouting program, I said, we need to get involved on the scouting program. I'm an owner, she could be the scout, and then she works with Craig. And obviously there's an affiliation. I lean on Craig for some different scouting advice. We make decisions as a group, and I think that it's an absolute no-brainer for any owner to have some sort of scouting affiliation. If you don't, you're already falling behind.
Absolutely, I agree too, and it's something I've been recommending. As soon as I signed up, that was one of the things I noticed was if you're a franchise owner, no different than the NHL. It'd be like the NHL not hiring any scouts, right? If you were an NHL owner or GM and you didn't hire any scouts under you, but it's a very foreign concept to fantasy hockey because no other platform is doing scouting, and it is. It's just so foreign because everybody, like I said, lots of leagues have a rookie draft and the GM just knows enough about the first round of the NHL draft or prospects, top guys they can pick. So it hasn't resonated, and not all 31 franchises have affiliated scouts yet, but maybe after listening to this podcast, we'll have a few more new scouts showing up in the coming days. And unfortunately they missed out on this draft, which has got a ton of talent from the 2020 draft class that was off limits until now. That takes us to 10th overall in Alpine Prospects, which is Jeff Ray and Andrew Grover. Jeff Ray, again, works for Dauber Prospects as a scout in the real world. And Alpine Prospects at 10th overall have selected Finnish defenseman Topi Nimela. I struggle with his pronunciation, but Topi Nimela of the Toronto Maple Leafs, defense prospect for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Another guy who was sort of considered one of the top Finnish defense prospects for this year's draft. Some had him in the middle of the second round, slid to the third round, and Alpine Prospects have swooped in and grabbed Topi Nimela of the Toronto Maple Leafs at 10th overall.
Yeah, another guy that when we had Jukka Nevalainen on that we discussed this player, and another guy that we did have. I think a guy that has some good all around abilities. I don't think I'm trying to look back at the list if he was on the first wave or the second wave that they have, but we did him on the next wave. So. This is where I'm getting really excited because I think their pick is next. So I'm looking at some of the players. So I'm a little bit distracted by some of the guys that are still there trying to figure out who their pick is. So I'm pretty excited. And the one thing I just wanted to mention, going back to the scouting thing, is it's great. If you're an owner, you have an affiliation with a scout, you can work out whatever kind of financial details you want as far as, payment and how much this is going to be and how much you're going to get off that. And then when it's your wife, you just say, okay, you just take all the money, right? And all everything else. So there's no discussions when the affiliate is your wife because she just takes it all. So it really makes that part easier because you don't have to worry about splitting the money.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And Topi Nimela actually reminds me a little bit of Ville Heinola, the Jets' first round pick from last year in 2019. They both play kind of that safe, smart game, but not super offensive types necessarily. But you're right. Next up, 11th overall is Trish Millard and Craig Button with the High Level Scouting Agency. And Dean, do you want to announce their pick, or do you know who they got?
I'm just by looking at it. Is it Vero?
It is. It's a back-to-back Finnish defenseman. Emil Viro of the Detroit Red Wings is on his way to high-level scouting and potentially starting for Duckman's Domination down the road.
Well, and that's the great thing is that you're basically as an owner, I'm thinking, okay, this is the guy that Craig Button has suggested. He would look good on our roster at some point. And the one thing I love about one thing that Craig talks about is he doesn't scout with a tape measure. I'm sure you've heard him use that quote before, and I'm sure he's not the guy that invented that saying, but he doesn't. He doesn't look and say, oh, this guy is good for blank insert size, right? Big or small. And that's where you're looking at this guy, like under 6 feet, but mobile, a guy that can play in the top 3. And I'm just trying to find the sheet. Oh, Jonas Brodin comparison from Craig Button on this type of player. So, that's a guy as an owner of Duckman's Domination, knowing that guy is in the fold of affiliate scout of mine. I'm really excited, and I know Craig will be excited because that was the number 2 player as I look at the list that they had submitted. So this has got to be, I think, a really, really banner day for them in a blind sort of draft to get the number 2 player that they had. I think they'll be pretty happy.
Yeah, to get your second guy, like I said, I think you had Jeremy Poirier at 1 and Emil Viro at 2, but to get your number 2 guy down in 11th overall, that's something to definitely be excited about. And I do think between Viro and Nemella, I think Viro could have more offensive upside potentially. I think he could be maybe a little bit more of a power play guy down the road. Similar finished defenseman, but nonetheless, Viro a little bit more offensive upside. So from 12 to 18, we're just going to rattle off the picks now instead of going into great detail. So I'll read off all the way from 12 to 18, finish off the first round, and then you can weigh in a little bit on that range of picks. So 12th overall is Ruby ISS Scouting Agency. Harrison and Ruby ISS have selected Los Angeles Kings forward Martin Chromiak. Another guy that I liked close to the first round, but Martin Chromiak goes 12th overall to Ruby ISS or Rubius. And then 13th overall is Easton Scouting Solutions. Paul Easton, they're affiliated with Rock Republic, but Paul Easton heads up Easton Scouting Solutions, probably our busiest scouting agency so far as marketing their prospects. They've assembled a lot of free agent prospects. They're trying to sell them to franchises. They're doing a really good job marketing, but Easton Scouting Solutions have selected Detroit Red Wings goaltending prospect Jan Bednar, who's coming over to play in the Q, I believe, next season, or will be there once imports are allowed to the Q. But Jan Bednar, Detroit goaltending prospect to Easton Scouting Solutions at 13th overall. At 14th overall, Prestige Worldwide, which is affiliated with both the Murder Hornets and Crypto Knights. Prestige Worldwide has selected Blake Biondi, forward prospect for the Montreal Canadiens. He won the Mr. Hockey Award as the top high school hockey player in Minnesota this year, which is a prestigious award. Lots of NHL players have won that, but Blake Biondi goes 14th overall to Prestige Worldwide. At 15th overall, we have Matt Murray of Monarchs Affiliated Scout. Matt Murray is the son of Al Murray, Tampa Bay Lightning Assistant General Manager and Director of Amateur Scouting, and now Stanley Cup champion Al Murray. So Matt Murray, with his first ever pick or first ever ad in the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League as a scout, has selected Samuel Nashko, defense prospect from the Columbus Blue Jackets. And Samuel Nashko, a real mobile defenseman. He's Slovakian, but he's developing in Finland, and he might be coming over to the Western Hockey League next season. I believe Seattle picked him in the import draft. So interesting player there. At 16th overall is Spitfire Scouting. Dale Hardy is the head scout for Spitfire Scouting, and they have selected Zaid Wisdom, a forward for the Philadelphia Flyers. And Zaid Wisdom plays on that line with Shane Wright and Martin Chromiak there in the OHL. And that's with the Kingston Frontenacs, that's going to be one of the more high-powered junior hockey lines over the next couple seasons. So Zaid Wisdom from the Philadelphia Flyers to the Spitfire Scouting. At 17th overall is Anil Manhas. He's the head affiliated scout with West Coast Express. So the West Coast Express affiliated scouts have selected Casper Samontavel, a small Finnish forward with a ton of offensive potential. One of those high ceiling players drafted by the Los Angeles Kings. So Casper Samontavel of the Los Angeles Kings is now property of the West Coast Express affiliate scouts. And rounding out the first round in the 2020 open market draft was Beast Mythology Scouting. which is Beast Mythology Scouting is an affiliate of the Brutes. Jamie Swain is their head scout. Ben Gill, Jesse Gill's son, is also involved there with Beast Mythology Scouting, but they have selected Damon Hunt, defenseman from the Minnesota Wild and the WHL's Moose Jaw Warriors. So that rounds out our first round with Damon Hunt going to Beast Mythology Scouting.
Oh man, it's interesting because it's so much around the map, and you know when I saw that the number 2 player on their list had slipped to them at 11, you start thinking, oh, who else is going to start falling out? Martin Cormier, I think, is going to be a good player. I like watching this guy. He gets the puck off. He doesn't scrape the ceiling with his kind of his one-timer. Zaid Wisdom was as another player. So it's interesting. I can't really. I'm trying to think in my mind of the guys that were drafted as I look at their list to think about who might be available as you move along. And then you start thinking about how long are people's lists, right? Like, how long is my list going to go where it's just all of a sudden it's only like 2 or 3 people picking and you're getting so many people on there. So it's really interesting. The pick that I really, really liked, I liked the Bednar pick. I thought that was a pretty astute pick. So that's the beauty of scouting, is seeing, and in this format as well, right? You see the value of the NHL teams, and now you see the value of the scouts in our platform.
For sure. And you mentioned it's interesting to see how long the lists are. I can tell you that one list already passes in the second round. The list they submitted was 4 or 5 players, and they were all gone by the second round. All 18 scouts did submit lists, and all 18 scouts got at least 1 player in this draft. I'm on round 7, or just finished round 7 prior to recording the podcast. It's going to be a long night ahead. I think there'll be at least 25 rounds, maybe more, but there's still probably about close to 10 scouts going into the 8th round. So at least 10 of them had, close to 20, 30, 40 players or more on their list. And like I said, a couple were, I think the longest list was 142 names, and there was some in that 80 to 90 range and over 100. So it's going to be interesting to see how, and again, here's our late round steals in this draft, right? So we'll see who ends up getting who down the stretch here, but it's fun for me to put these drafts on, and it's certainly, I'm sure, exciting for everybody watching to see the results. Certainly the scouts are happy with who they got, hopefully.
Well, it's so interesting because, you can cast a really, really wide net if you want to, but, as we kind of talked about in the owners meeting today, the how many players what's an NHL team come out of a draft class with? If you're hitting on 50%, that's pretty awesome, man. If you're going into this thinking, oh, I bought 50 players and 70% of them are going to work out. I don't know what fantasy world you live in, and it's not the one, it's not the one I live in. So you have to look at it and discuss, and that's Trish and I were talking about, like, do you want to get a whole bunch of players and then half of them don't work out? And then what do? You have to hope that the other ones at least sell enough for you to break even. And, there's only so many bad prospects she's going to be able to unload on me if I don't have to do the dishes for a week or something like that. Right. So you have to weigh the pros of, like, how many players am I going to get? If I get, 35 players, how many of those players are going to work out? If I get 100 players, well, am I getting, what happens to the other 50 that don't work out if you go 50%? So the strategy is so interesting because it's not just like, oh, all these players are going to develop. Probably most of them won't.
Yeah, like I said, if an NHL team has 7 picks, that's what they start every draft with. Or draft year, they have 7 picks, 7 rounds. They're lucky if they get 3 players to their NHL roster as regulars. That's considered a good draft, 3 out of 7. So there's going to be a lot of busts here, but one nice thing is the UFHL and the Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports is going to build out a number of other hockey leagues that will emulate the KHL, the SHL in Sweden, the Liga in Finland, the DEL in Germany, the NLA in Switzerland. So as these guys maybe don't make the NHL and they play in the AHL or wherever, the franchises and the scouts will still have a way to profit from those prospects because they're still going to have value in some league on the platform eventually as this continues to grow. And and evolve. But I'll throw it back to Darren because I know we're running late or running long on time here, so I'll let Darren take the show back.
Well, I was going to say, you believe it or not, I'm still here, and I could actually literally listen to you guys all night. There might be a few bathroom breaks, maybe some tasty drink adventures along the way, and some cheese and sausage or something. But man, it's amazing to hear the depth of knowledge that you guys have, just going back and forth. And I like what you guys bring to this. This is what's so important. It's good for guys like me. I have no inclination of being a scout. Don't worry, I'm not taking any of your jobs. And I just don't have the capacity to do it. But it's interesting to hear these little tidbits, the strengths, the weaknesses. So when I see these players on the ice, that's what Dean was talking about. That was Larry was talking about, or Craig on one of your podcasts. It's really interesting stuff to me, and it brings so much more to the game. Yes, the scouting is an interesting feature. Yes, we have big plans, as Larry alluded to, but that's for another show. I wanted to thank you, Dean. I know you have a very important baseball game to get to. And I don't want you to miss it. No, I don't want any swearing on the air. I don't have a 7-second delay, so it'll be what it's going to be. But, I know you're a multifaceted sports kind of guy, and that's why you got your baseball. Even darts, I've seen you allude to that, so you're probably into almost everything. Dare I say even cricket? I don't know. Maybe one day we can go there too. But a lot of people watch cricket. But I want to thank you for your time. Great to have you on the show. Learn about Duckman's Domination. The Marsh, I wasn't aware of that. I must have missed that somewhere, so good to know that. And I appreciate you taking the time here today.
Well, it's been a lot of fun, and when it comes to darts, like, who wouldn't want to go watch darts live? Have you not seen the party that like when the guy throws the dart into the board, the crowd goes bananas. Like, I want to be in that atmosphere. It just looks so awesome. So, when we get the dart league going, I definitely want to make an appearance there. And yeah, it's been so much fun to be a part of this and see this grow, and I can't wait for the expansion to all of the other sports that we can get into and take fantasy really to the next level. So thank you so much for having me on the show. Hopefully I wasn't too long-winded, and go Duckman's Domination.
Absolutely. Important dates, November 1st. I guess fees need to be paid. Anything else important there, Larry?
Yeah, so November 1st is sort of the official start date of our 2021 campaign or season for the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League. So throughout October, we're hosting 3 or 4 owners meetings. Owners are voting on some potential changes or new additions to the league, and all those changes and additions will take effect. They'll be implemented starting November 1st, and there'll also be a buyout auction on November 1st for any of the players that were bought out during the month of October. But November 1st is sort of the next big day. Like you said, entry fees are due. All these prospects that were purchased in the entry auction yesterday, the scout draft today, the deadline is November 1st to get those payments in as well. So the bank needs to be notified for November 1st that you got to get your payments in, and then we're into next season mode starting November 1st as the first official day of 2021 in the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League. So exciting times ahead.
Any questions or misses or need more information, Larry's always available, as Dean fully knows. Thanks for joining us today on UFFS Podcast number 9. You can find us pretty much anywhere on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, where this will be, and we're very active on Twitter as well. We have a website, www.uffs.com. Want everybody to stay safe, take care, go Duckman's Domination, and we'll see everybody next time. This is Dean, Larry, and Darren signing off. We're you own the game on UFFS Sports.